I go to extremes to make sure that my environment is clean.
Where most of biohacking's try this, try this, try this, you're coming back and saying, maybe let's stop trying and let's go back and edit. But
I like to also say sometimes biohacking starts with what you stop. So it starts with no. It starts with, I'm not doing that anymore. For me, the first no for me was the decision to go against my doctor. And that's part of why I so strongly believe that it starts with no, because it gets back to the basics of the body having the most capacity for healing out of anything available on the market.
I think a lot of women notice, whether they track or don't, that we spend a lot of time in more of a sympathetic state throughout the day, unless we consciously make an effort to downregulate.
When you stimulate that by humming, it increases your HRV. And so I was yesterday from a 10 on my HRV, that's how stressed out I was, up into the 50, just from 3 minutes of humming. Most powerful thing I do. It gave me massive headaches. Because I had mold in my head. And so that was $27,000 of pain. The only way to actually heal and get better, and this goes back to starting with no, is to be conscious.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the 90% Healthy podcast. We are excited to have a great guest today. We want to introduce my old friend from back in the biohacking space, Sandy Martin. Sandy has just recently authored a new book called Biohacking Begins with No. And what a title. But Sandy, how have you been? What are you up to besides publishing your book? And what's been going on?
Well, now you're making me think that's a better title than my actual title, which is Biohacking Starts with No.
Okay,
but I
starts
like
with
the
no.
Biohacking Begins. So, it was, I should have consulted you before I published. I like the ring of that.
I am not an editor. Let me be really clear.
I like to also say sometimes biohacking starts with what you stop. So it starts with no. It starts with, I'm not doing that anymore. And let's clear out the garbage and get moving.
And now we met, you are a promoter, you promote events, you promote biohacking events. Are we still in that game?
We are in a holding pattern in that game.
Okay.
There's a lot of regrouping that I think needs to take place in the industry. We noticed earlier this year that biohacking has taken a backseat to longevity culturally, and that the leaders in the biohacking space, even our primary leader, the godfather of biohacking, Dave Asprey, he even has lessened the use of the term biohacking. And so there's a restructuring happening that's not just with the language, but it's also with the culture and the politics. People are interested in making America healthy again. And then that term also is extremely divisive because it's attached to a political movement. And so there's been a lot of shakeup in the process this year. And I think that health is the second most divisive issue in this country right now.
Wow.
Right behind immigration.
That's an interesting statement, but we're not going to touch that today because
That's a whole podcast in and of itself.
As much as I want to sit down and have a drink and go deep on that with you, we're not quite going to go there today because I really want to focus, because I love the concept of your book. I love what you've done here. I'm from a Dave Asprey standpoint, no offense, Sandy, I've been biohacking since 1982, when I first started to understand the science of exercise physiology and modifying my internal environment, my external environment. So I love that definition, but it's not new. But as we move forward and we deal with this, I do believe it's bringing on a whole new thought process, cognitive process, which I love. I think that's so important. And again, where most of biohacking's try this, try this, try this, you're coming back and saying, maybe let's stop trying and let's go back and edit. Is that a fair statement?
What I'm saying is that we have to get back to first principles. And so there's nothing more powerful in the marketplace at all than the capacity of the human body. Every drug on the market is doing something to trigger the human body in such a way that it repairs itself. David Sinclair was on the Peter Diamandis podcast a couple weeks ago and said it outright, that the code for reversing aging is embedded in our bodies. And he believes he's figured out how to turn that switch on and off. It's not an external stimulus. It is something that lives within us. It's the code for being born anew. And we see that when you take a 40-year-old man and a 40-year-old woman and they make a 0-day-old baby. Their cells that are 40 years old create life that is 0 days old. And that power to be completely renewed, that transcript, that blueprint, that information exists within us somehow. We don't exactly know how. David may think he knows, and he may come out with a way to turn it on and off, and that would be awesome. But what I know for sure is that we upregulate our genome when we relax our nervous system, when we eliminate toxins, when we minimize the internal burden by filtering the external world. Just simple water filter does a lot to help the body do what it does naturally. Same with an air filter, making sure that we keep our home dust free and that we're buying products like mattresses, things that we have to buy anyway. But a mattress could be full of VOCs or it could be made with wool and latex. Like, there are ways around the weight of modern society's conveniences, right? Like, they're conveniences that you can roll up a mattress and get it to my house real fast. But what's the toll that's going to take on me when I sleep on a memory foam mattress? And most people don't even know that a memory foam mattress can harm them at all. And so it's about getting real about the chemicals and figuring out a way to, in this environment, we're not meant to be hermits. We're not meant to live on a mountainside. Some people can, and that's beautiful and wonderful, and I'd like to vacation there, but I have to live here, and I have to create here, and I have to build a life here. And so what can I do to enhance my body's natural capacity for thriving? Just by minor tweaks, giving up a few things, maybe adding a few things, but I think it starts with what we give up.
I absolutely love that. And on a personal note too, I noticed that a lot of the things ever since I've been into biohacking, it was all about all the things I can start doing because science shows it works. But then again, with the bioindividuality that we all have, understanding that what works for one person will not necessarily work for another takes that trial and error is something that we all need to consider to an extent, because taking the other person's word for it is just sometimes not enough because your body might react differently. And also when it comes to, I love that you mentioned the environment, because Don and I talk about it all the time, that our environment is constantly fighting against us in so many different ways. Like you mentioned, the air, the water, just the furniture around us, and those little things sort of poke our nervous system and keep us in that fight or flight, constantly in that chronically elevated state of stress where our body cannot tap into that innate intelligence of repair and regenerate. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your genesis and your story, the beginning, where how did you land on the power of saying no, and what you don't do is more powerful sometimes than what you do? Because did you do a lot of things and then realize that, hold on a second, let me step back? Or was it something that you've always known that this is how I should start?
No, I was a go along kind of a gal, and I'm one of the very few people in the biohacking space right now that got the vaccine. Like, I was on board. I had MSNBC on and I was scared.
Sandy, I got it too, so don't be
Okay.
so just
I'm not the only one.
No, yeah. You're
I
not
did
the
have-
only freak out there. I'm with you.
I did have EBU done because I heard it can get rid of spike proteins. So I do add some treatments sometimes. I'm not without biohacking. I just say it starts with no. But for me, the first no for me was the decision to go against my doctor. So I had a brain injury and I had a brain scan done that this neurologist thought was a traumatic brain injury that had come back to haunt me from a bump on my head when I was 10 and I was 45. And that was absurd. And so he performed the tech at the clinic who did the SPECT scan, because I didn't go to an Amen clinic because I was afraid to get on an airplane because it was 2020 and I was all afraid of COVID. Well, probably not allowed to say that word on a podcast, but I'm not speaking ill of anybody.
It's just science. All it is science.
Yeah,
That's
so
all it is.
I was scared. And I went to a local clinic and they performed the test wrong. I had to take Dr. Amen's brain certification course while I was cognitively impaired in order to even find out that it was performed incorrectly. And if I hadn't taken that course and if I hadn't had that scan, I wouldn't understand from Dave Asprey's information with Dr. Amen that mold could have been the cause. They literally thought from the scan that I had hit my head so hard that the front and the back were dark. And it just wasn't true. What it was mold. But I was prescribed a drug given to stroke victims called nimodipine, and it was to open the blood vessels in my brain. And knowing the importance of the blood-brain barrier, I was really concerned about, at 45 years old, not having had a stroke, not having an immediate urgent need for opening the blood vessels in my brain. What would that do to me? What would be the long-term effects? And I said, no, I'm not going to take it. So that was my first act. And that's, it's not just saying no to biohacking, and the overdoing it with the supplements and the devices and things. It's saying no to the power structure that places us in a position where we feel like we can't question authority because he's the doctor. He's done this. He says it helps people. Well, I'm sick. He and my husband both ganged up on me. And I just flat said no. And I had to figure it out. I had to figure out what was wrong with me. But one more reason why I say it starts with no is that I bought a hyperbaric oxygen chamber because that heals the brain.
I am so jealous.
And it's with my ex-husband now, so don't be too jealous.
Okay. Maybe I should become friends with him.
You should. He's lovely. And so I bought that chamber, hard shell 1.58 chamber, and it gave me massive headaches because I had mold in my head. Like, it just didn't work. So the one thing that is arguably the best under 99% of situations, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, hurt me. And so that was $27,000 of pain. And it helped later after I detoxed. But if we don't get to the root cause, the best biohacking in the world isn't going to be right for somebody. We have to know first. It's really hard to find out, though. It's really hard to figure out what's causing what ails people.
How did you start figuring out? Sorry, Don, you can
No,
go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh my
I was
God.
just curious, like, well, who did you
I was
go?
throwing everything at the wall. Like, I had a friend who just graduated from med school, and so he was helping me think through things. I have a cousin who's an optometrist, and he was helping me think through things. My ex-husband's best friend's a dermatologist. They just like smart people helping me think because I was clueless. And I don't know, I started with the brain scan, and then I did a gut test, and I tried a heavy metals test for a while. I thought I had arsenic poisoning because I took activated charcoal after eating a crab cake. That'll make you think you have arsenic poisoning. So don't do that. And it wasn't until I got to the Liquid Vita clinic in South Florida, and they did a comprehensive panel on me, that I was able to see where I was deficient and where I was fine. And then I had kind of a baseline understanding of my health, and I was mostly fine, except my growth hormones were way off, and in general my hormones were off, but it wasn't enough to explain my symptoms. And so at least I knew I wasn't dying, which is what I felt like. And it was not long after, like I was literally trying anything, any suggestion anybody made. And then Dave Asprey said, test for mold, and now I know that should be the first question anyone asks. If someone says, I've got a lot of recent weight gain, I'm feeling really sluggish, I can't sleep, I can't stay awake past 7, my whole body aches, I feel like I have chronic fatigue, I've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, all these things should prompt someone to get a mold test, because autoimmune conditions can just be labels given to the unexplained, and the unexplained is often mold because it's just so common in our environments. And so I tested for that, and I've had enough mold present in my body to justify the symptoms I was having, and I began to detox. And that was really my journey to getting better, but it took me a year and a half before I felt any sense of normalcy come back to my life.
Thank you for sharing. Wow. Are you aware where that mold exposure got to you at such a high level?
Yeah, it was hidden behind walls where I lived in an area that I'd painted. And so the VOCs from the paint probably exacerbated the delivery. So it's my understanding from talking to Jason Earl from Got Mold that if there is a carrier for the mold, like a VOC or dust, then it can create a bigger reaction faster. And because I was painting and breathing in the fumes in a concentrated area that I didn't know had mold present because it was behind the walls, that I think it ran straight through my optic nerve and my sinuses to go to my brain first, because it was 2 weeks after that that I went from thriving to unable to read a spreadsheet.
It is very instant. That is crazy.
Yeah. And I had the brain scan within 6 weeks. Like, I was on it. I could not lose momentum, but it did anyway. I was just too confused to work properly.
And ever since then, do you test for mold whenever you live right now? Did you do any type of
Before I move in. And so I had to have my new place gutted. When I find a home and I'm moving again, and I just went through this process, and the new home is going to be remediated next week, and it's just part of the process for me. The hardest part is going and looking at new homes because they all have mold in them, and then finding a situation where it's low enough value to get a total reno, right? Because every home has something somewhere. Every home I've ever looked at.
especially you're in Florida, right?
I was in Florida. I'm in Kentucky now, and I'm moving to Virginia. And I found a home in Kentucky that I could afford to renovate. And it took me 4 months to move in, but that's what I have to do. And that's, I don't mean to scare people, but the flip side of that is that the only way to actually heal and get better, and this goes back to starting with no, is to be confident in my body's ability to heal. 25% of people are said to not be able to clear mold from their bodies genetically. I don't actually believe that's true. I think that if someone goes to the extremes I went through to detox and to heal, that they can. And that if someone's told they can't, then they won't. That the mind is the most powerful pharmacy. And so I, for a while, thought I was part of the 5% between the 70 that clear it just fine and the 25 who can't. They say 5% of people who get sick with mold get better. But I suspect that there are so many more in that 25% who believe they can't get better who actually can. But the first step is to not experience symptoms. And that's a hardcore way of living. When you wake up achy every day and you just go, no. Now you have to be in a situation where you know you're doing all the right things. I was detoxing, I was lowering inflammation, I was on the right path, and I was making all the right decisions. I had gotten out of the environment, everything was in good order. But that next layer of healing is not just the stuff we do, it's not just the detoxing. It's the mindset. The mind has to believe that the body can be healthy. And that's part of why I so strongly believe that it starts with no, because it gets back to the basics of the body having the most capacity for healing out of anything available on the market. So I used to have extreme chemical sensitivities. My friends, if they wore perfume, they knew they couldn't hug me. I couldn't be near them. Walking through a mall would give me massive headaches. And I don't have those problems anymore because I let it go. And I've met a bunch of people recently who have had similar situations, similar backgrounds, similar problems with mold, who haven't adopted the mental component. They've done everything else and they're not healing.
So can you walk through a mall now and the perfume not bother you?
Yeah.
So adjusting the mindset has adjusted the physiology.
Yes, so I don't retest in my home. I keep watch for moisture, I keep watch for signs, and I'm aware if I have symptoms that I should pay attention for a little while, but not forever. If I suspected I had a real problem, I would address it. But I don't continue. I do run 3 Jasper air filters in my home. I have a 2,000 square foot home, and 1 is enough for the whole home, and I run 3. So I go to extremes to make sure that my environment is clean, and I just believe I'm healthy because it's the most supportive thing I can do for myself.
Yeah, without a doubt. I've seen it time and time again, how much the mind can impact the level of optimal health people experience. And I see it in my family. I've seen it in my friends. And so many times I'm like, can you just reframe this a little bit and you will experience this differently? And I wonder, ever since you've said the no and you've figured out your journey through getting into that optimal thriving state, what are some of the things that you do that you notice actually making a positive impact in your life?
The thing that I do throughout the day, I want to say 3 to 6 times a day, is that I have on my Apple Watch, I have a little icon up top. I put my HRV on it. It's on my screen on my watch. And then so is the mindfulness app. So if I breathe for 3 minutes with the mindfulness app, it will record a new HRV score. And so I'll hum for 3 minutes, 3 to 6 times a day. I do it. I did it before our podcast today. I do it to shift to make sure I'm heart-centered and in a good, resilient state. I was really stressed out yesterday, some things with my family. I mean, it's a really great story I can tell about my dad and the medical system. It's just so challenging, and dealing with doctors makes me super stressed. And so I spent a lot of time just breathing and humming out, because in that, the nasally hum, if you can get it where you can feel it vibrate right here in your nose, you're also releasing nitric oxide. And so you get a blood pressure effect and a vagal stimulation, because if you can feel it from your nose to your neck, it's that the vagus nerve that comes into your face here and runs down your neck and then goes down to your heart and your gut. And when you stimulate that by humming, it increases your HRV. And so I was yesterday from a 10 on my HRV, that's how stressed out I was, up into the 50s, just from 3 minutes of humming. Most powerful thing I do.
I love that. Yeah, lately, vagus nerve stimulation has been one of my little mysteries that I'm figuring out, and seeing what are some of the ways that I can upregulate my vagal tone and drop into that parasympathetic state and shift my nervous system, because that's one of the things that I notice. And I think a lot of women notice, whether they track or don't, that we spend a lot of time in more of a sympathetic state throughout the day, unless we consciously make an effort to downregulate. And whatever that practice may be for a woman, for some it's red light therapy, for some it's humming, for some it's meditation, or even just walking outside. It's one of the things that I started to consciously make an effort to, because I notice that my mental capacity is just not there if I am not taking the time to downregulate. And with vagus nerve stimulation, I've done some of the humming, a little bit of the gargling, and of course, some of that different breathwork modalities. And then lately I've been playing around with pulsetto to see how that little microcurrent stimulation impacted. And it's very nice to see that within just, 6 to 10 minutes, it can bring my data, I use Aura, down into that restored state, which is so nice, which is something that, as much as I do notice that I am feeling better, I am feeling more calm, but it's always lovely to actually see the data reflect that.
It helps so much.
It's one of the things that I think a lot of people should know. And I see a little bit of a trend having vagal tone having a moment and vagus nerve stimulation, because it is a direct impact on our nervous system that I think hasn't had that education curve climbed yet, that I think people are starting to be curious about. Now, do you still test for certain type of health metrics occasionally?
Yeah, I go back to Florida actually to go to Liquivita to get my testing done, because I still have friends there. So I go once a year, and I always renew my labs when I do that. I'm encouraged to see that Function Health does a lot of the same kind of testing. And so if it's not convenient for me to travel, then I have other options. But I personally really like monitoring my IGF, my insulin levels, my A1C. I mean, all of these things are in really great range. I've been mostly ketogenic for about 4 years now. And I use the Keto Mojo and test my ketones and my glucose. I recently just figured out my water filter is not calibrated properly, and it was giving me too alkaline of water, and it was causing me to have tingling in my mouth, my fingers, and my toes. And I'd been experiencing that for months and thought it was eggs, thought it was blood sugar, thought it was all kinds of things, and it was my dumb water. And so, when we introduce these gadgets, we have to monitor them. We have to make sure that they're working properly. And it's frustrating, the lengths that we have to go to. It's a lot to keep up with. Like, how does a regular person stay on top of all of the things that are necessary to be healthy?
But
It takes an obsession.
Sandy, what is your professional background prior to diving? Because I was looking at some stuff earlier. You've done some other events like Comic-Cons and things like that. Are you a natural marketer promoter, or do you have a science background?
No, I don't have a science background. I just had to get well. And so when I looked at, after I got better and I got divorced, I realized I needed to do something that united my passion with my skills. And I had been running Comic-Cons with my ex-husband for years, 50,000 person events, really, really big events. And so I think I overshot a little with Biohacker Expo. I tried to create something too big, too fast. And I had William Shatner my first year. And, we really tried to get to the mainstream on board right away, not realizing how skeptical people were about healing in this whole industry. And so figuring out who's actually on the front lines of this battle for our health has been hard to discover. For a while, I thought it was just every man and woman out for themselves. And then I thought, well, maybe it's the health coaches that are really pushing this forward. And I figured out that health coaches get into health coaching because they were sick. And so sometimes they're stuck. And then, it's not the regular physicians, maybe it's the functional practitioners. But then I went into the Facebook group for functional medicine. I encourage you to join it. If you join that group, you will never see a functional medicine doctor. They don't agree on anything. I met with some people.
You have a doctor now that you trust, someone that you go to, because I think that's really important.
I trust Jonathan Fields, and he's a doctor of Oriental medicine. He's an acupuncturist with a functional medicine certificate, and I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt on his functional medicine because of all his Chinese medicine training. Mm-hmm. I think that some people with very little training can get a functional certificate. And so the field, you got to be real careful about the rest of the credentials. And I wouldn't have trusted a DAOM if I didn't know him. I would not have been inclined to go that route. But every question I asked him was met with such a thoughtful answer. And every time I've needed a test that's out of the norm, he would know what to give. And he's probably oriented more towards supplementation than I am. I don't like to oversupplement, and he doesn't either, but he more than me. So I disagree with him, and he likes that. It's fine, right? I think that finding someone that you trust means finding someone who listens to you in disagreement with them, supports your agency to disagree, and supports your journey and how you need to get where you're going. Back to health. I got really angry yesterday because my dad was getting a CT scan and they didn't put the order in correctly. And so we went all the way there, and I am just the third leading cause of death is medical error. And so I'm sitting in the lobby thinking through all the things that could go wrong. And I knew that there were 2 orders put in. Turns out the second one we were there for wasn't actually put in. So we had to leave. And so I made a t-shirt yesterday that's of an anvil squashing Wile E. Coyote, and the anvil says medical error, and he's holding up a sign that says 30 leading cause of death.
Nice.
Because I just got so angry. I had to do something to let off steam, and I guess making a little art. And I'm actually turned it into a t-shirt. It's heading to my dad's house. I hope he wears it to his next doctor appointment because I think it could save his life. Not that we want to go from heart disease or cancer, but we certainly don't want to go because of a doctor error.
Yeah, part of the challenge, and I think it's important to have empathy for people in that space. There's so much pressure on the traditional medicine practitioner right now. I wrote a script a few days ago that says, they went to med school. They went to undergraduate with a dream of helping people. They went to med school. They put so much time into it, but the system is putting so much pressure on them. They're getting ping-ponged from room to room, and the system is ripe with error. Now, the people in the system, you know what? These are good people. They woke up every day. They don't go to work thinking, okay, I'm going to go take someone out today. They go to work wanting to help people, but the system is so difficult. And I think what I hear you saying is that you've got to have your own system, and maybe that system starts with editing.
Well, it starts with speaking up for yourself, for sure. Like one of my dad's doctors prescribed ferrous sulfate for iron. And I was like, no, you're not taking that. You're going to take the iron that's chelated. And he goes, I'll just do what my doctor said. And then I threw up my hands and I was like, fine, you listen to the guy who's had no training in nutrition and ignore me, who's been obsessed with it for years. Fine. And then when my tantrum was over, because, I'm still 2 and I'm in front of my parents, I sent him a note and I said, why don't you look at the difference between these 2 types of iron in Perplexity or ChatGPT and read up on it yourself. Right now, anyone who is inclined, has that slightest bit of intuition that maybe there's another way, if you just ask AI, it'll tell you. It'll tell you what the other options are, what the other considerations are, and it won't give you health advice, but it'll say what other people in similar situations do. It will help you read your labs. It will help you understand trends. It's been the best tool for getting my dad on board, for sure, for understanding, bridging that gap between Sandy with no science background and doctor who's spent his whole life doing this. And in the car the other day, my dad was saying he feels better with the better iron that I recommended, and said, yeah, so how about that? Listening to the doctor, he goes, they don't know anything.
They know a lot, but again, it's important to have empathy on this as we work our way through. Because
Yeah.
you know what? I had a similar situation the other day. A good friend of mine who is a cyclist who's struggling with some AFib and some stroke issues and so forth, but he still wants to ride his bike. He's still a very talented bicycle rider, but his cardiologist had him on a beta blocker. And I get it. I get the fact that patient walks in, you have this list of symptoms. Here is the script for resolving those symptoms, and a beta blocker was part of that. And I said, I spend the night where I go down to Columbus. I said, Tim, the problem is the beta blocker is working opposite of what you want to have happen from your exercise. And I said, go back to your doctor, ask them, can I take my beta blocker after my ride, or can we shift to a different blood pressure medication? The cardiologist said, let's just skip the beta blocker. And he just dropped it. He had no allegiance to the script at all. It's just boom, it's gone. And oh, by the way, Tim's riding his bike better. He's feeling better. There's a lot of things going on there. And I think it's important. I'm not saying that we second guess or we question the credibility or the motivation of any of our medical professionals, because I think it's important to put back to them that again, they're good people, but the pressure on them is significant. And oh, by the way, you are the 10,000th person that's walked into a room with them that they know nothing about. And they have to interface with someone that your physician friends, my physician friends, I have long-term relationships with. We know each other, like the back of our hands. A lot of times they don't have that. So we're not saying ignore. We're not saying even, I don't even want to use the word second guess, but I do want to own my process.
Well, if I may be a little bit more specific with my grievance of the system, I do agree completely that the doctors are stuck. They're in a situation where because of the volume and the pressures on them, they are constrained to a set of answers. Mm-hmm. And so they're almost like order takers now. I'll tell you my symptoms, they tell you what to buy. It's all mediated by insurance. And I think that the agency from doctors has been taken away. I don't think that his doctor recommended ferrous sulfate. I think the doctor recommended what the insurance provides coverage for.
Or what his limited training. Listen.
I don't even think it's his training. I think he's got a checklist.
He threw something out there, and you just gave a better option.
I mean,
because it's what Medicare has approved, and it's bureaucratic. And if it's not Medicare, it's the private insurers, and they're geared up for the lowest common denominator.
And I think in this system, we're often giving a general solution for an individualized problem. And that's when, to gear back a little bit to biohacking, that's where we can, even if we don't have a science background, I don't have a science background, I have a journalism background, I have an innate curiosity to start to understand my biology and how I can help perhaps other people figure out their biology and optimize it in a way that works for them. So, and I think a lot of our listeners don't have a science background, but it's interesting to see that more people are in this space of, let me figure out what works for me and let me start asking questions. And I love that you brought up, Sandy, the fact that you got to ask questions. And like, yes, you might not want to second guess, but you understand your body the best, ideally, especially if you really want to try to tune in it and begin to kind of be your own little health detective. And try to question whether the general solution would work for my individual problem, because it's sometimes not. Like how Don mentioned his friend, that beta blocker was a general solution for high blood pressure, but in his situation, something else was a better solution. So I really encourage people to start asking questions. And that's where, with the 90% healthy, we come into the aspect of, you don't have to do everything. You just have to do what works for you to build up the resilience for your body to a point where it can withstand the punches that your environment is throwing at you constantly.
And I think it's really important that we start to get better at listening to our bodies.
Yeah.
Understanding what our bodies needs means paying close attention. And if we're in sympathetic overdrive, taking care of kids, errands, career, everything else, there's no time to really experience what our bodies need. And so we can budget in some downtime and the power of now and live in the present moment and all of these things and go on vacation, and we can get these little recharges, but the real power is in being able to integrate all of that on a regular basis, move in and out of that sympathetic drive, being able to power down. You know, when my dog walks past his favorite dog's house and I'm like, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go, he has to shake his whole body because he's so upset he didn't get to see Dolly. He shakes his whole body and he's like, better, and then he walks with me. But if he doesn't shake it off, he's not better. And we need to remember that we have to shake off our stress and that it's important to listen. That tension builds. And I've got a power plate. That's one of my biohacks. And the whole body vibration is a literally fantastic way to shake it off.
I absolutely love that. Yeah, I love, and it always reminds me, like you mentioned, seeing dogs shake it off, because they do so many times. If you just cuddle a dog for a little too long, once you let them go, they just shake you off and reset. It would be nice to see humans do to shake off a little bit more frequently, because we hold that tension in for time and time again, and it's slowly. I love how you have on your on the Biohacker Expo website, you have things that are zapping your energy. And I would love to get into that, the 19 bio villains. Would you share a little bit about how you came up with it? And I love the little Comic-Con aspect of it. You actually have those villains. It is so relatable. So I would just love to have our audience see how many things there are that are zapping your energy.
Better iteration that I've created, that it's ugly right now, but super functional. It's called rootcausedatabase.com.
Mm-hmm.
And I have linked chemicals and health conditions on that website. So you can go through a list of either one. They're going to cross-link to the other. You could start with your daily routine and discover which chemicals are present in your daily routine. So from brushing your teeth to commuting to work and everything in between. Even little things like how we make our coffee in the morning. If we're running it through a plastic machine, we're picking up microplastics. And so I go through morning to night the routines on rootcausedatabase.com. Then it links to alternatives. So I'd been using a plastic cutting board. I'd been using black spatulas. I'd been using, my shampoo had phthalates. I didn't realize it. It smelled so good. Of course it did.
Yeah.
Right? And I went through and I started to clean up the little things in my house. But that website was inspired by a friend of mine who had a friend who wanted help, didn't know where to start. And as I started to run through some ideas, she was like, no, too much, too fast, can't do it. And I was like, okay, here's a list of the daily routines, pick one, move forward. And it gives people a way to really to go through. But the principle behind it is, whether it's the aluminum in your deodorant or the phthalates in your shampoo or the air freshener in your Uber, oh, that's the one that drives me the most
God.
nuts. It's when we can't avoid it at all because it's someone else.
Yeah, it's like in my apartment, sorry to cut you off, but it totally fits. Where I live, there is a gym in the apartment that the apartment space provides. And the air freshener they have in there is just suffocating. Like
It
I
is.
cannot. Like this morning, I literally worked out outside because I just could not. And one of the guys opened the door of the gym and I could still smell that air freshener. And I'm like, I can't. This is I'm about to
Taste
talk
it.
to them. Like, can you guys switch to like maybe like a essential oil diffuser or something better? Yeah, it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is very interesting. And I love that you mentioned that, yes, for a lot of people, all of this stuff that is in our environment is absolutely overwhelming. Like when I started to think about it, wait, I need to change this, I need to change that, this thing is wrong. It's like my friend's mom would always tell me, I can't do anything. Everything is poison. And I'm like, well,
It is. It feels that way, right?
it's
Yeah.
so easy access. You just have to put a little bit more effort into understanding and finding the things that aren't poisoning you.
Right.
And
It's worth it, I think.
yes.
Right?
It's and with that worth it, would you sharing how do you decide what's worth your time, money, and energy? Like, do you have like a checklist or like a thought process that you go through? Like, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm not going to do this.
For me, it's about easy substitutes. So whenever I replace something, I consider whether or not it met the standard. And that's when I make my decision. So,
Is there something new that you recently added?
I'd say the most recent was replacing my coffee maker. I really enjoyed a drip coffee maker. Once I realized heating up that plastic and even just the filter that it was running through, realized the damage that could be doing to me, I just switched to an all-metal French press. It's a pain in the butt to clean, but whatever. That was probably the biggest change for me. Beyond that, it was in the foods I buy. So I'm biased towards buying, if it's pre-made, buying something that's in a glass jar rather than like a cardboard coated container or plastic container.
Makes sense. Very cool. Very cool. What's next for you? I know we're coming up at the end. Is the Biohacker Expo coming back?
We're looking at rebrand and probably 2027. I'm going to do some virtual events in the next few months, and I'm dedicated to solving there are a lot of people trying to sell to longevity clinics. What I really want to do is to figure out what makes their jobs easier. Because if they can serve more people at lower costs, then we advance this cause. They're on the front lines, truly. And so I'm working on a few solutions that have their benefit most at heart for me. And I'll be ready to launch a couple of those solutions in the next month. And that'll form the foundation. It's not a silly little mastermind. It's not hokey. It's not exploiting that audience for the sake of putting a couple sponsors in front. It's really trying to get to the heart of why their jobs are so hard. So for example, I know a few people in that space who push weight loss drugs because that's the only way they make any profit. It's just like we talked about with doctors. They get into the longevity business, the anti-aging business, for all the right reasons. Making a living at that is hard. And so trying to solve that puzzle and that riddle is most central to me right now. And I feel like once I have that nailed, then I'll stand in front of them proudly and say, try this, and we'll all get healthier. That's the goal.
Well, when you get that figured out, you let us know and we'll revisit that here because I think your objective with your events and what you're doing is totally aligned with Klaudia and I's objectives and personal missions and why we do 90% healthy. And I think we're excited about that. We're really excited to have you, and the book. What a wonderful addition. What a wonderful change to the mindset that is out there. Take a second, take a step back, Maybe it starts with no. And I think that's really important. And this applies not just to biohacking, but to life and performance as well. So many times I'm working with an athlete or a coach, and you have to take a step back and say, okay, why are you doing that? What is the value you expect from that? Maybe it's not there. So let's go ahead and edit that. Let's take it out and just get some time back to breathe.
Amen.
So
Thank you so much, Sandy. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to share, that you're working on? I like to bring this up at the end because I don't always ask all the questions. So I want to make sure that if there's anything that needs to be voiced, there is a room for it.
Not right now. I think I would love to come back and share the results of my deep work right now.
works.
Actually, you mentioned you're sorry, there's one more question, just like bing. You mentioned that you're on a ketogenic diet for majority of your days, weeks, months, etc. Do you also pair that with fasting?
Yeah, I try to fast less.
That's what my question, because a lot of people overfast, especially women.
I love fasting. I love not eating till noon and not eating after 6. Like, I really love a very tight window that's not recommended for women. I just feel good when I do it. And so I've worked hard to add things to my morning routine that may break my fast without creating that slowdown that I get if I have carbs too early. I'll put collagen in my coffee. I know some people say it loses its impact if it's in coffee. At least it's some protein, and then I'll have a protein heavy breakfast later, maybe closer to 10, but I don't like to consume much until after 12. And by the time I have dinner and I have even just a small amount of carbs, that at 5 o'clock could just like drain me, and I want to keep going. So I do things like I take Vitality from Ginfinity later in the day. Sometimes I take NMN to help get my system going again, because I have so much that I want to accomplish that it's just not realistic for me to work from 7 to 5. I'd really rather work from 7 to 9 p.m., but that's just because I'm a lunatic, truly, which is why we need the vagal nerve stimulation and everything else to stay balanced. And that's why we biohack, right? We biohack so we can live our purpose.
So we can live our
live it more
lunatic
fully.
lifestyle, I believe.
That's right.
There you go. That goes back to the 80s.
Yeah.
Who was the lunatic fringe?
That's
now
awesome.
I'm dating
I love that.
myself. I apologize.
Well, I remember the 80s. I just don't remember the reference.
We'll bring it up on the next episode. I'll go back and look it up.
That's awesome. Love that. Thank you so much for sharing and for taking the time to come on and
Thanks for
share
having me.
your past, your present, and all the things you're working on. It was really a pleasure to hear. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Sandy, it's great to see you again. I can't remember the last time I saw your face, but I can't wait until we see each other in person again and we share a great dinner like we did the last time we were together. What were we
For
down
sure.
in Texas? We
were in West Palm.
In West Palm, okay.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things that I love about this community is there are just so many people that you love to see. They're good people to have in your life. Want to recommend to our audience, don't forget about, you can find the book at biohackingstartswithno.com. You can find out more about Sandy, or you can just go to Amazon and pick up the book there. But what a great addition to not just biohacking, but to the human condition. Thank you for what you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody, if you want to learn more, we talked about Sandy's website, biohackingstartswithno.com. If you want questions for Klaudia and I, you can reach out to us either on the socials at 90% Healthy Podcast. You can hit Klaudia at Longevity. I'm sorry, Klaudia, give it to me so I don't mess it up.
You're good. Longevity Journalist. That's where everybody can find me on socials. On my website is longevityjournalist.com. And yeah.
And you can find me at trainrecoverwin.com or reach out on LinkedIn, Don Moxley on LinkedIn. Look for us there if you have questions. And we can't wait to get Sandy back on the podcast. Thanks again.